Order, order. The clerk reads the title of the order.
The Draft Radio Equipment Amendment Northern Ireland Regulations 2024.
I call the Minister to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Betts. It's a pleasure to see you in the chair this afternoon. I beg to move that the Draft Radio Equipment Amendment Northern Ireland Regulations 2024, which were laid before the House on the 9th of October, be approved. This instrument will implement common charger measures in Northern Ireland, and in particular for USB-C, becoming the common charging point for a range of portable electrical devices that require wired charging. I want to say at the outset that this instrument is expected to actually have a limited impact in practice. Many manufacturers may have already moved to USB-C to continue to supply the EU market, and as a result, USB-C has already effectively become the industry default in Europe. I'm sure members are at this moment looking at their chargers and phones to see whether they've already moved on to USB-C. An industry tell us that they are using USB-C for the whole of the UK already to avoid supply chain complexity. Devices that comply with common charger requirements will also be able to be legally placed, of course, on the GB market. So we consider it highly likely that the same devices with USB charger ports will be available across the whole of the UK. The common charger methods aim to reduce environmental waste, increase consumer convenience and save money for consumers, as they will need to buy separate chargers for each device. And we consider that could potentially help businesses and deliver consumer and environmental benefits if we were to introduce a similar standardised requirement across the UK, and accordingly we have launched a call for evidence on that very issue. Implementation of common charger measures in Northern Ireland also ensures our compliance with international law, which facilitates Northern Ireland's continued unique dual access to the UK internal market and to the EU single market. I'd like to just set out a little bit of background to the instrument, Mr. Betts, if I may. The Radio Equipment Directive 2014 establishes a framework of regulatory requirements for specific categories of electrical and electronic equipment that is placed on the EU market or put into service in the EU. When we were in the EU, the UK's Radio Equipment Regulations 2017 implemented the Radio Equipment Directive into domestic law on a UK-wide basis. In November 2022, the EU formally adopted the Common Charger Directive, which amended the Radio Equipment Directive, and the EU Common Charger Directive requires, amongst other things, a common charging solution based on USB-C for smartphones and certain other portable electronic devices. There's a full list at the back of the instrument that use wired charging, and this will be implemented from December 2024 and will be implemented for laptops from April 2026. To provide for its continued unique dual access to the UK internal market and EU single market, certain EU legislation continues to apply in Northern Ireland, including the Radio Equipment Directive, under the terms of the Windsor Framework. The instrument will therefore amend the UK Radio Equipment Regulations 2017 in order to implement these latest changes in Northern Ireland, enable them to be legally enforced. So the instrument introduces new regulatory requirements for specific categories of electrical and electronic equipment that use wired charging and are placed on the Northern Ireland market. And the instrument amends the 2017 regulations to provide for simplification, whereby USB-C will be the common charging port, meaning one charger will work on multiple devices, bringing cost savings and environmental benefits. It will standardise fast charging technology, meaning that charging speed is the same when using any compatible charger for a device. It will also see the unbundling of the sale of a charger, meaning consumers will have the option when they're purchasing a new device whether to actually buy a charger alongside it. That will hopefully reduce electronic waste and costs for the consumer. And there will also be additional visual and written information about charging characteristics, the power the device requires and whether it supports fast charging, thereby improving the information available to consumers. This will help them understand if their existing chargers meet new devices' requirements and helps consumers select compatible chargers. The common charger measures will apply to certain categories of handheld devices, including smartphones that use wired charging as from the 28th of December this year, and to laptops, as I say, from 28th of April 2026. Offences will be amended to cover the common charger requirements already mentioned, including to ensure consumers are offered the choice of purchasing specific categories of electrical and electronic equipment without a charging device if they wish, and that equipment is accompanied by visual information showing whether a charging device is included or not. I can assure honourable members that enforcement authorities will continue to take a proportionate approach to compliance and enforcement activities in accordance with the regulator's code. And in almost all cases, we expect that by working with and supporting businesses, compliance will be achieved without the need to recourse to criminal penalties. The Northern Ireland Department of Justice has confirmed that they consider the offences provided for by this instrument are consistent, proportionate and will not have any negative impact on the criminal justice system in Northern Ireland. Officials in the Office for Product Safety and Standards will be providing industry guidance to ensure businesses have all the information they need on how to comply with the new requirements, and they will also be liaising with Northern Ireland District Councils who are responsible for enforcing the radio equipment regulations in Northern Ireland, ensuring that they have all the necessary information for them to be able to do that. So with USB-C charging effectively becoming the industry default, it is my view that this could actually potentially help UK businesses if we provide regulatory certainty and deliver consumer and environmental benefits by introducing similar requirements across the whole of the UK, which is why we have launched this call for evidence. And we expect this instrument to bring consumer and environmental benefits to Northern Ireland. And it also ensures, of course, our compliance with international law in relation to Northern Ireland's continuing dual access. So on those closing comments, Mr Betts, I'd like to say I'll commend these draft regulations to the House and wait to hear other members' contributions.
The question is, the committee has considered the draft radio equipment amendment Northern Ireland Regulations 2024. Harry.
Thank you very much, Mr Betts. And as the Minister has set out so clearly, this is an instrument that's intended to give effect to the EU Common Charger Directive, which does apply in Northern Ireland, as we're required to do under the Windsor Framework Agreement that was signed last year by the Conservative government. And so certainly we will not be opposing this legislation today. Accepting this regulation upholds the Windsor Framework, and it contributes to the free-flowing trade within the UK while protecting Northern Ireland's place in our United Kingdom, and it safeguards the balance of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. I note the Minister has mentioned the plans by the government to consult on a UK-wide common charging solution for electronic devices. I'm sure that from a consumer convenience point of view, we will all welcome a world in which we can be sure to find the right charger at the right time. And I welcome what the Minister was saying about the impact that will have on the environment, because over time there'll be less plastic waste, I think, sitting in our drawers and our homes. But I do encourage the Minister to consider, as he looks at the consultation responses, our ability to remain independent from the EU by not blindly following this regulation across the whole of the UK, and indeed consulting appropriately with all the businesses and retailers who will be affected by this. In all the years that we were a member of the European Union, we still seem to have a situation where we all had different plugs, and it's very much on the consumer's side to welcome progress towards a world where perhaps we will have the same charger, but at the same time I know that the market forces themselves may enable that outcome. And so having made those observations, Mr Betts, we're not proposing to oppose these regulations.
Jim Hollister.
Thank you, Mr Betts. Of itself, of course, there's nothing controversial about the type of USB charger that one might use. But there is something very controversial in Northern Ireland, quite appropriate, about the source of this legislation. Here we are in the Parliament of the United Kingdom, and all this Parliament can do is to nod through someone else's laws. The decision that in Northern Ireland you must have the EU-style USB charger flows from a decision by parliamentarians in a foreign parliament. It was the parliamentarians of 27 other countries which decided that this would be the common charger which would be used. And of course it was the protocol, now called the Windsor Framework, which didn't change one word of the protocol, which decreed that Northern Ireland, in 300 areas of law, of which this is one, would not be subject to the laws made in this place or in its devolved assembly. Certainly.
Would you just remind us how Northern Ireland voted in the Brexit referendum?
Sorry?
Would you remind us how Northern Ireland voted in the Brexit referendum?
The Brexit referendum was a national vote, and it asked a simple question: do you want the United Kingdom to leave the EU? It didn't ask the question, do you want GB to leave and leave Northern Ireland behind? But that's what we got. And we got that in that this United Kingdom surrendered control over those 300 areas of law to that foreign parliament. Now, the honourable member may be comfortable with the fact that my constituents are disenfranchised in the making of the laws that govern them. I wonder would he be so comfortable with the fact if it was his constituents who were disenfranchised in making the laws in 300 areas that govern them. I suspect not. And all I ask for my constituents is that they have the same rights, the same enfranchising rights, as everyone else's constituents in Great Britain. Is that too much to ask? And yet, in the making of this regulation, this Parliament is answering the question that is too much to ask. Because Northern Ireland, we are told, must be subject to foreign colonial rule. That's what it is. When you say to an area, you will be governed by laws not that you make or that your Parliament makes, but that a foreign Parliament makes, that's the very essence of colonial rule. And that is what we are subjected to. And the degree to which the government, and of course it was under the previous government, the degree to which the government has abandoned sovereignty over Northern Ireland is illustrated by the very explanatory document that accompanies these regulations. It says there will be limited impact, but it didn't conduct an impact assessment. Why did it not conduct an impact assessment? Well, paragraph 9.1 of the explanatory document tells us. It tells us that a full impact assessment has not been prepared because measures resulting from the European Union Withdrawal Act 2018 are out of scope of assessment. Out of scope of assessment. Laws that will affect my constituents are out of scope of assessment by this Parliament and this government, because the right to make those laws was given away to the European Parliament. So it's not about whether in itself the type of USB is controversial or not. It is the constitutional point that Northern Ireland has been disenfranchised, robbed of the right to have its laws made in its own country, and robbed of the right now to even have an impact assessment, because in those 300 areas of law, they're beyond the scope of assessment. That's why, for this proposal, there only is an EU impact assessment, no UK impact assessment. That, in a way, says it all. Sure.
I'm grateful to him giving way. He's making a powerful and coherent argument. I think what he's saying is this may or may not be a good law, but he would have liked it to have been assessed, its impact assessed properly, and the people of Northern Ireland had a say on it, the say he has in this chamber today. Can I ask whether he thinks overall it is a good law, albeit one that constitutionally he would have preferred was passed a different way?
Well, I said it's not of itself. What type of USB you use isn't particularly controversial, but how you make it, how you impose it, it couldn't be more controversial, because you impose it by the avenue of disenfranchising the people of Northern Ireland and saying, you will have no say over whether it's a good law or a bad law. It's someone else's law, and it will be imposed upon you. And that is the mischief that I'm addressing here today. And in that mischief lies the reason why this Parliament should not be a nodding dog to someone else's regulations. Now, the Minister tells us the government is probably going to bring the same requirements into GB. Well and good, but it should have been the government, not a foreign jurisdiction, that was bringing the prescription for the type of USBs into the whole of the United Kingdom, not surrender control over that to a foreign parliament. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Betts. In regards to the specifics of this regulation and how it affects Northern Ireland, it's just some clarity I would seek from the Minister in regards, again, to the explanatory note, and especially under Part 2, where the Minister did reference, I think that he had engaged with the Department of Justice, but I note that the impact on the public sector and the enforcing authority is actually our Northern Ireland District Councils. Can I just seek clarity as to what actual engagement has been had with those councils due to a regulation that is due to be implemented on the 28th of December of this year in regards, because this is I think the first, but this has been following on from the member for Northampton's point of view. If this had been a piece of legislation that had been adopted either in this place or through the Northern Ireland Assembly, that engagement would already have been had. I think in regards to the other point, that, and I welcome the fact in regards to the commonality that this law will bring about, and the inference that the government is now putting out a call of evidence to ensure that we have that continuity of charging across the United Kingdom. Could I ask, has the government considered then stalling the implementation of this regulation in Northern Ireland so that it can actually be implemented at the same time across the entirety of the United Kingdom rather than being delivered in two different parts? Thank you.
No members are seeking to catch my eye. I call the Minister to respond to the points made.
Thank you, Mr. Betts. Well, first of all, can I welcome the Shadow Minister to her place. I hope that we're able to work constructively across the Chamber, and I acknowledge and welcome the comments she's made in support of this. I think she made an important reference to our draws and how many different charges we will all have in them. I think we can all see on a very personal level why this might well be a good thing for all consumers. And I can assure her that we are acting independently of the European Union. We're not blindly following their diktat, because we are in the middle of a call for evidence on this particular subject. As I've said already, I think the industry response has been that this is the direction they were travelling in anyway, but I can assure her that we will consider all responses before we make a final decision on that. The Honourable Member for Northampton made an impassioned speech, I think mainly on constitutional issues and the application of the Windsor Framework, which is obviously the legal remit within which we are discussing the regulations today. I think he did say that he wasn't particularly concerned about the subject matter. I don't know if he's had any constituents raise this issue with him. I can assure him that we have worked closely with relevant officials in Northern Ireland, and indeed, to pick up the other contribution from the opposition member, local authorities in Northern Ireland on the application of these regulations. And the impact assessment from the EU did indicate that this would have a de minimis effect on the market, because this was something that the industry had already moved towards, and therefore I think that was something that's been echoed in the conversations that we've had. So an impact assessment wouldn't, I think, have revealed anything that would be of significance before us today. So on that note, Mr. Betts, I'm pleased to move the regulations as set out.
The question is that the committee has considered the draft radio equipment amendment Northern Ireland Regulations 2024. As many of that, please say aye.
Aye.
The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order.